Alright guys, welcome to Active Directory in Windows Server 2008 R2. In this first video, this first lesson, we're going to understand the concepts of Active Directory, and then hopefully at the end of this little slideshow here, this little PowerPoint, we can install and configure our first force root domain. Okay, so I'm going to go through all the concepts, everything you need to know to get started with Active Directory. Assuming you already have Windows Server 2008 installed. If not, just go to Microsoft, type in Windows Server 2008 R2 trial, and you can download and get 180 days free. So I have a fresh install of Windows Server 2008, and we're going to set up Active Directory. So let's get started on the concepts of Active Directory. Okay, so first of all, to install Active Directory in Windows Server 2008, you need at least one server that meets all these following requirements. The operating system. So you need Windows Server 2008 Standard, Enterprise, or Data Center. The web edition cannot act as a domain controller. Your hard disk space. Other than the space required to install Windows Server 2008, you need at least 500 megs for the database and the sys volume folder, plus at least 100 megabytes for the log files. But clearly you're not going to just have that. Like, you need to have at least, I recommend at least 15 plus gigabytes if you're going to have a small network or a small domain. If you're just testing it, 10 gigs is fine. You need your disk volume must be formatted with NTFS, but that's not really an issue because by default when you install Windows Server, it creates your partition as an NTFS. And you need a DNS server. So if you don't have a DNS server available, like if this is your first force root domain, and also a root domain is the first server installed with Active Directory. A server alone can be considered a domain. A domain controller is any server that has Active Directory installed onto it. And your force root domain is just the first server that you install Active Directory on, and which we'll get into here in just a moment. So I'm just jumping ahead of myself. And of course you need your admin privileges. So you have to be logged in as a local administrator of the server or computer that you're working on to make a new forest. And then to add a domain to an existing forest, you need to be part of the enterprise admins group in the forest. And then to add a domain controller to an existing domain, you must be part of the domain admins or enterprise admins group. Okay, so next what we're going to cover today. So we're going to cover what a domain is, what a tree is, what a forest is, what a child domain is, what an organizational unit is, what a domain controller, the global catalog server, the operations masters, and installing Active Directory and domain services. So that's what we're going to cover today in this video. If you already know what they are, feel free to skip to the end or skip until you see the non-PowerPoint presentation here. And so the basic concepts of Active Directory. What is a domain? Well, a domain is just like a logical grouping of all your computers, users, and groups that all share a common directory database. And what that is that's Active Directory. So a directory database is just somewhere they can go. They can search for files, folders, users, groups, printers, whatever. And a domain is also a security boundary, and that is controlled by an administrator. So you can also think of it as a domain as, let's say you yourself are the administrator for your whole entire, like you're the top dog of your group. Whatever your boundaries are as an administrator, that's your domain. Okay? So you can have a domain with 5 domains controllers in it, all separated geographically, but that's all considered a domain. Okay? So it's not like a domain is like a server in the building and that's it. Like, you could have a company that owns, like, let's say Tim Hortons if you're Canadian, or Starbucks. Well, there's like oops, sorry for swearing, but there's like what, 10 or 15, 20 to 25 Tim Hortons or Starbucks within one town. Well, they can be classified all as one domain called, you know, Ontario or Barrie, Ontario, you know, whatever the case may be. Okay, so moving on, what is a tree? Well, a tree is just a collection of Active Directory domains that are all connected by default with a two-way transitive trust, and they share the same global catalog and schema. So the global catalog and schema are part of Active Directory. The global catalog is just like your catalog. You can flip through it, find users, groups, computers, everything. It holds a replica of your Active Directory. So you can't write to it, but you can read from it. And all domains in the same tree must have a contiguous namespace. So what that is they all must have the same name. They all must share a common name. So for instance, in my videos, it's going to be techknowledge.com is going to be our forest root domain. So you can have a tree within there called, you know, let's say techknowledge.com, and you can have other domains in that tree called sales.techknowledge.com, and then have another grandchild domain called ontario.sales.techknowledge.com. See how they all end with techknowledge.com? That's what a tree consists of. It's just, picture like a tree and branches, and all the branches are your different domains, but at the bottom they all connect to the same root tree, which we will get into. And a tree is contained in a forest, and a forest can have multiple trees. We'll see that in a second. So what is a forest? Well, kind of just explained it, but a forest is a grouping of all the Active Directory trees that have a trust relationship between them. So a forest can hold non-contiguous namespace, unlike a tree which has to have a contiguous namespace. And here's a little example of a contiguous namespace would be sales.techknowledge.com or products.techknowledge.com, and a non-contiguous namespace would be techknowledge.com and let's say otherdomain.net. So techknowledge.com and otherdomain.net could have a trust between each other, and all that means is that techknowledge.com trusts the otherdomain.net, and they can share files and users from otherdomain.net can log into techknowledge.com and vice versa. Now, seeing how the namespaces are different, that trust has to be set up by administrators. The trust between trees, which we will see because when we're going to install our second domain controller, it's going to be part of a tree already, and that trust is automatic. It just happens. It's just secret behind the scenes. But when you're talking about joining two different, I'm going to say namespaces together, that's where the administrators have to set up the trust. Continuing on here, so a child domain is simply just previous. It's like sales.techknowledge.com or products.techknowledge.com. So it's like simply just another domain that is set up as a server within the same organization. You can have a child domain located across the world if you wanted to. And then, you know, I got my examples of a child domain, sales.techknowledge.com, products.techknowledge.com. And notice how they both end with the same namespace. And you can also have grandchild domains. So that's simply just another domain within the same tree. So that could be, like you see, ontario.sales.com or .techknowledge.net. Oh, wow, .com. Or alberta.products.techknowledge.com, and so on. Okay, so what's an organizational unit? Well, an OU is an Active Directory container object that allows an administrator to logically group users, groups, and computers into like a quote container to be easily administrative by the administrator. You can set up the OUs with the same concepts of like organizing your file system. So you know how when you open up your files, you got like your C drive, and then in your C drive you got my documents, my pictures, my musics, files, I don't know, whatever else you want to have. Well, picture your C drive as your domain, And then everything else is your OUs, or folders, whichever you want to call them. So when you have your folder called pictures, well, you're going to group all your pictures into your pictures folder. So you can administrate or set up and, you know, apply permissions to all your pictures. Instead of having to do each picture individually, you would put those pictures in a picture folder and then just make changes to the folder. That's the same concept of an OU. So you have your users. Now, setting up an OU is, there's lots of ways you can do it. There's, you know, you can, let's say you have a company and you're worldwide. Well, you can have OUs called Canada, USA, China. And then within those OUs, like within Canada, let's say, you can have, break it down to province. So Ontario, Alberta, whichever you like to do there. Or sorry, BC. Whatever you'd like to do there. And then within those OUs, you can have like managers, administrators. And then you would put the users inside of their proper OUs. So if you have a manager, you can put his name, his user account, which is an object. As you can see at the first line, an OU is an Active Directory container object. Okay, so you can take his user account and put it in the managers group and put all the other managers in there, and then just you can set policies to the manager's OU instead of each manager. Or you can set it up, if you only have the one company, you can just set it up like departments. You can have an OU called HR for human resources, or managers, or accounting, sales, so on and so forth. So an OU is just a simple way for an administrator. The users have no idea what OU they're in. They don't see it, they don't know. It's just for administrators to easily administer a group of, whether it's computers or files or users, doesn't really matter. Printers, you can have a printer's OU and, you know, set up permissions for the printer's OU, whatever the case may be. Again, we'll get into this in more detail. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Right now, I just want you to get a little understanding of what the terms are that we're going to be using. Okay, so moving on here, we got a little tip. So remember, assign group policies to groups, not individual users or computers. What that means is, like I was just saying, you put all your sales users inside of a sales group, and then you apply the group policies, which we'll get into in a couple videos from now, into groups. Okay, so your group policies. So let's say you don't want all your salespeople to change the resolution of their monitor. Well, you put all the sales into the sales OU, organizational unit, and then you apply a group policy onto that sales OU. And then everybody in that OU is affected by that one policy. You see how easy that is? And here we got some more basic concepts continued. So what is a domain controller? I kind of mentioned that earlier. A domain controller is any server that has Active Directory domain services installed on it. The domain controller is also where all the users authenticate when logging onto the domain. It also holds a master editable copy of the Active Directory database, which means you can, and that's like the schema, so you can go in there and edit it. You know, Microsoft doesn't recommend changing the way the schema operates, but if you're advanced enough, by all means, go nuts. But I highly suggest you back it up before you make any changes to the database. And the database holds a complete copy of every single object in Active Directory. And an object can be a user, group, computer, folder, file, printer, whatever. That's what an object is. And objects have attributes like your name, your last name, department, I don't know, email address, just things of that nature. Folder, you know, how big, whatever, you know. That's what an attribute is, because you're going to see attributes and objects and a lot of little confusing words. You need to understand what they are. So an object is like an object in Active Directory. User, group, anything that you pretty much put into your Active Directory is considered an object, really. And every object has an attribute, and you can add attributes if you want to. So there's lots of attributes for, let's say, users. There's lots of attributes, but one they don't have that's kind of common is you can set up a social security number attribute, so that the user accounts will have their SIN numbers in there. Or you can have you can set up an attribute to have like a little thumbnail picture of each user. So if you're setting up, like, I don't know, badge IDs or something, you know, things of that nature. That we're not going to get into at all for a long time in these tutorials, but I'm just making you aware that you can change the attributes of an object. Okay, moving on. So what's a global catalog? Well, the global catalog is just a searchable database where users can locate objects within Active Directory. It just contains a partial replica of every object, and the partial replica contains the most commonly used attributes of the object. Like I said, name, department, email, company, contacts, and things like that. So anytime you search for anything within your domain, you're going to be connected to the global catalog server. Now you can have a global catalog server on all your domain controllers or just one. It's recommended to have at least a backup, so it's good to have at least 2 global catalog servers. And it's also good to, let's say you have a domain in Canada and a domain in Australia. Well, if you only have one global catalog server in Canada and your users from Australia go to authenticate and everything, they have to, you know, pass your network, pass the wide area network connection, and that could be slow. It could cost a lot of money. They're gonna have to connect to your Canadian server, and then, you know, more communication going back to Australia just to authenticate. So that's a lot of wasted bandwidth and speed. So down here, the global catalog server also allows the users to log on to a domain other than their home domain by using the user principal name. So UPN is just a username in the format of like an email address. So down here I have like a little example. So users@sales.technology.com. We'll get into the UPNs. You can change this, so if you don't want people to see what your full domain name is, I can just have it users@sales, and that's all they see. And .technology.com is kind of like automatic. It just puts itself at the end of sales, and no one sees it, so no one can actually like map out our domain, let's say. It's good for a little bit good for security. Okay, so that's pretty much what a domain controller is. It's just like a catalog server, and you just search it. And like I said, it's good to have multiple, in case even one like fails, you can set up backups. All right, so what are the operations masters? So these here are just a restricted set of functions that are ran on a specific domain controller, which are known as the flexible single master operations. So FSMO servers, or simply operation masters. And the 5 functions that are part of this group are as follows. And please note that I don't cover this fully in this tutorial, and if you need more info, just look it up, you know, do a Google search. But at least you're aware of these 5 function roles here. So the first one is the schema master, which holds the only writable copy of the Active Directory as schema. So here, only one domain controller in the whole forest holds this role. And yeah, you can move the role around. So if you have like 6 domain controllers in your whole forest, and you want to move the schema master, you can. Yeah, that's, you know, we can get into that. We'll move them around and everything. But as of now, I'm just showing you kind of what they are. You got your domain name master. So what this does is just ensures that when you create a domain, that it's unique within your tree. So you can't have 2 sales.technology.com domains within the same domain tree. So that's what the domain naming master will take care of. It makes sure that you have no duplications on your network for like naming servers and everything. And again, only one domain controller in the whole forest holds this role. Next, we got the PDC emulator, also known as the Primary Domain Controller, for Windows NT 4.0 client computers. So, Windows NT 4.0 client computers, well, let's say, look at the PDC server, and that's like their domain controller. That's how they authenticate to. That's where they go, because they have older technologies than the new server 2008 does. So they set up this PDC emulator, and this emulator also acts as a time synchronization master for the whole domain. And only one domain controller in each domain holds this role, not the forest. So you can have, one in technology.com, you can have one in sales.technology.com, you can have another one in ontario.sales.technology.com. Doesn't matter. The infrastructure master. This server processes any changes in objects in the forest received from the global catalog server and replicates to other domain controllers. Now, it's recommended to separate the infrastructure master from the domain control or the global catalog. If you have those both on the same server, then the infrastructure master never really has a chance to send out the processes changed from the global catalog server. So it's best practice to separate those two roles, or just take global catalog server off and move it to another server. Whatever is easier for you. Doesn't really make a difference as long as they're separated. And again, only one domain controller in each domain holds this role. And lastly, we got the RID master. So this assigns security identifiers, so SIDs, to the objects created in its domain. So this ensures that no two objects have the same relative identifier that is unique to each object. So all this is like when you're setting up users or printer accounts or group accounts, that you can't duplicate them within the same OU. Okay, that's important. You can have duplicate names, but they can't be within the same organizational unit. Your sales OU, I can't have two Paul St.Onges. Okay, and the RID master will show you that, and hey, you have a duplicate name. And the server also hands out 500 RIDs to each domain controller in its domain for creating objects. And when they ran out, you just ask for more. Simple as that. So you could come across a time where you're just, you got a new organization, you guys are setting it up and you're making user accounts, and then all of a sudden you can't make any more user accounts. Everything on your end looks fine. Well, the RID master could be down. And or like where you ran out of your 500 RIDs, your RID master could be down, and you'll have to bring it back up, investigate that end of it. But just like a little tip, I guess. So why Windows Server 2008? Well, hey, there's lots of features and abilities in Windows Server 2008. I'm just going to show you 3. So I think the biggest one is the read-only domain controller. So this is great for a company, like let's say, I'm going to use Tim Hortons again. I don't think Tim Hortons is housing IT staff in each Tim Hortons, right? No. So they probably have a read-only domain controller, if they have one at all, but just using them as an example. They probably have one there in their little building where it pretty much acts like a domain controller, global catalog, but they can't really do anything to it. It's locked down. They can authenticate to it. They can look at the global catalog through it, so they don't have to cross the wide area network connections and slow down and increase speeds, or increase costs and all that stuff. They can have one locally where it's very secure. And it's also good too if you don't really have like that secured server room, with locks and heat motion sensors and everything like that. You can just throw one of these in, and it acts like a domain controller, but it's just a read-only, so you can't change it. You can't make any changes to it. And yeah, up here users can also authenticate to it and log on to the domain, increasing the speed of your logins. And it also saves on network consumption, as data does not have to travel the WAN or LAN. Next is server core. Oh, I forgot my little T there, but it's just a stripped down version of any of the Windows Server 2008 operating systems. So it's like there's no GUI, so there's nothing, like you're not going to have a mouse. There's no little pretty pictures of files and the control panels and all. That's all gone. It's just you open up your command prompt and that's what you're looking at. That's it. It's great for security, and it's also great if, let's say, you don't have, I don't really want to say this because I don't want to push you guys to ever do this, but if you don't have a good enough server computer, let's say you're short on the, like the resource, like the RAM and all that stuff. Well, server core doesn't install any of the crap like media players and Microsoft Paint and games and so on. It's just simply the operating system at its core. Like whatever you need to function that operating system will be installed in server core, and that's it. And then whatever features and roles you add onto it, that's all that's going to be on that thing. Nothing else. So it's great for security, and it's great for the ease of a server. Doesn't take so much requirements to install a server core. And what's probably not maybe a lot of people know of is this last little point that I like to throw out, is the self-healing NTFS. So what it just has like a thread that runs, in the background, and that can correct the file system when NTFS detects a corrupt file or directory. Back in the day, if you had a corrupt file directory, you yourself had to go and investigate it, delete it, fix it, remove it, whatever you had to do to fix it. Server 2008 R2, automatic. The NTFS will detect it, and then it'll just fix the file. It's great for security and everything. Okay? So I don't know what this one is like. Oh, so next I just have a picture of what our force will look like. It's actually what we're going to be setting up, so keep it in mind to reference later on if you need to. Okay, so this is kind of what our force could look like. So up here we got our black. I just chose it black because it's our force root domain, it's the global catalog, it's the DNS server, it's the operations manager, it's the domain controller, it's it's everything here. And these all connect like a trust. Now here in the red box, I just separated that. That's our domain controller. Here in the orange box, that's our tree, and this is our other tree. Okay, so sales.technology.com, child domain. Alberta.sales.technology.com, grandchild domain, and then Ontario.sales.technology.com is another grandchild domain. These here are all set up with transitive trust, and they all link back up to this force root domain, and this is the root tree, and this is the root tree. So the root trees is just the first domain controller. I know I'm saying that a lot, but it's the first domain controller set up after your force root domain. Okay, so you got your force root domain up here, which is technology.com, and then you have your trust that the administrators have to set up between these two guys here, because this is otherdomain.com. So these two are together, but this doesn't, because this guy joins this, that doesn't make him a force root. He's just a root tree, and he can have child and grandchild domains just like this guy can have. But there's a trust relationship between them, so that anybody in otherdomain.com can access all the resources in technology.com. Okay, so here I guess I should have brought this up, but so we have a force called technology.com because that was the first server to be installed and promoted to a domain controller, and then we have the child and grandchild domains, and also a whole new tree called domain.com. And we're going to get into all that. Our first domain controller will be called technology.com, and our first child is going to be sales.technology.com, and then we're going to set up a trust for otherdomain.com. But that's going to be in a couple videos. So that's it for what I want to cover in the concepts of Active Directory, and now we're going to get into installing Active Directory. Alright, so here's my server. I got Windows Server 2008 R2 Enterprise, and I got my license valid for 177 more days, and it's free. If you want to buy it, go nuts, but it's about $2,000 to buy Windows Server 2008 R2. So, hey, it's up to you. You can get free for 180 days to learn, or go buy it. I would suggest getting the free one. So this is not what it will look like when you first start it. When you first start Windows Server, you're going to have this little screen that's pops up called Server Manager. And this is where you just get like a breakdown of your whole server. Okay, there's plenty of ways to get there. You can do that, or you can just right click and go to Manage. Same thing, Server Manager. You got your security, so it tells you for firewalls on, last time you checked for updates. So these two here are important, your roles and your summary. So your roles are where you would install Active Directory, domain services, DNS, DHCP, file server, all that type of stuff. Features are like .NET framework, group policy management console, stuff like that, things of that nature. So in this tutorial, we're going to set up Active Directory domain services. So it's recommended to go to your roles, go to add roles here. This is just a little, before you begin, verify, that you're the administrator, your network settings, static IP are configured, latest security patches, blah, blah, blah. You can hit this little checkbox, and then this little page will never show up again. You hit next, and here's a list of all the roles you can install on this server. Hyper-V, fax server, application. These are all the new Active Directory roles within Server 2008. So here is the main one, Active Directory Domain Services, and you got like lightweight directory services, right management, and you can also look to your right here and get a little description if you're unsure. So in this tutorial, we're going to do Active Directory Domain Services. So you can just put a little check mark there, and automatically it's going to install the features. So .NET Framework 3.5.1. It's going to automatically install it. So add required features. Okay. The other way you can install Active Directory is you can go to your command prompt here and just type in dcpromo.exe and hit enter. I don't want to do it because it's going to install the if you do that before you install your Active Directory domain services, it's not going to really take any much more longer, but it's going to look like some people have said that it froze up and it's not working. But all it's doing is it's installing Active Directory domain services in the background. So we're just going to go ahead and do that first. We don't really have to, like I said, you can just do it all through DC Promo, but I'm just showing you what the Microsoft exam is saying, that you should install domain services first and then do the DC Promo. So we're going to hit next. This is just an introduction, things to note. Read this over if you wish to. Hit next here. It's just a next game. That's all it is. Okay, so it's telling you what it's going to install. So it's going to install Active Directory and .NET Framework. So hit install. And this is going to run, and I will be back when this is finished, and we will continue. Okay, so we're back here, and everything's been installed properly, so we can just hit close. And then you can see down here we have in our role summary and our feature summary, we have one role installed with the red X. All that means is that we haven't set up the domain controller yet. And then down here you can see the 42 installed features. So we got all this stuff here. So we got Active Directory, Administrative Center, the tools, the .NET 5 framework, and all that. So you can hit your Active Directory domain services here. This will just load up here and show you that the server is not yet running as a domain controller. So run the wizard dcpromo.exe. So you can click this link, or you can go to your control panel and type in dcpromo.exe and hit enter. And then see here, it's checking if the binary domains are installed. Now the binaries are installed. That's where it would freeze up and take a while if we didn't already install Active Directory domain services. So now we're setting up the domain controller here. So now we're going to hit next, or you can go to advanced mode. We'll get into that later. So hit next, and then here's just you can read through this. This is just like a compatibility settings here. So you can hit next. Now here is where you're going to be creating either a new forest or an existing forest. So remember that otherdomain.com, we would click this. So create a new domain in an existing forest. So this server will become the first domain controller in the new domain. So that's what we would select for otherdomain.net. So we're not doing that. We're creating a new domain in a new forest. So hit next. And then this is going to ask you for the fully qualified domain name. And it gives you an example down here. So for our case, we're going to type in techknowledge.com. Okay, and then hit next. Now you can capitalize that, whatever you want. Doesn't make a difference how you type it. And just hit next. It's just going to check whether the forest name is already in use. Okay, so here we're going to, this is where you set the functional levels. Now this setting here, you can see you got Windows 2000, 2003, 2008, and 2008 R2. There's new features within 2008 and R2, so that's why there's two here. So what this will do, will set the I'm gonna say privileges, I guess, or the new concepts of your whole forest. So if you put this at Windows Server 2008, you'll see down here, you will only be able to add domain controllers that are running Windows Server 2008 or later. So if you have a Windows Server 2003, you cannot add it to this domain or this forest. So I'm going to leave it at 2003 because I'll show you later how to upgrade your forest functional level. So you hit next, and this here is just a domain functional level. So techknowledge.com and then sales.com, sales.techknowledge.com or products.techknowledge.com. These will fall underneath the domain functional level. This will not affect otherdomain.com or .net or whatever the other domain that we're going to set up later on. This won't affect that. This will only affect any of the techknowledge.com child domains or grandchild domains or whatever. So again, you can change it to, and see how 2000 is gone, because our forest functional level is set to 2003. Okay, so we're going to again leave this at 2003, and if you go up to 2008, you'll just see these features available at Windows Server functional level include all features available in Windows 2008 domain functional level. Following features: authentication assurance. Okay, so we're going to keep it at 2003 for now and hit next, because we might have a 2003 domain controller that we might set up later on. Who knows? So hit next. It's examining the DNS configurations. Now keep in mind, we do not have a DNS, so it's probably going to prompt us to install a DNS server or point to one. In our case, we're going to be using this server as our DNS server, our Active Directory server, global catalog, and master operators. Okay, so that finished, and now it's telling us the additional options here. So the first domain controller must be a global catalog, so it's grayed out. We can't even change that. And the first domain controller cannot be a read-only domain controller. DNS here is optional. So if we had a DNS server already set up, we can point to it, but we don't. So in this case, we have to make sure the check mark is there and install the DNS server on this domain controller. And here you can see we recommend that you install the DNS server on the first domain controller. So we can just hit next here. And this pop-up is if you don't have a statically assigned IP address, it's recommended to set one up. What that is it's an IP address that an administrator sets up and will never change unless manually changed again. Dynamic is a dynamic IP address would be what you'd get from a DHCP server, as you can see here. You can use it, but it's not recommended because your IP address could change. And if it does change, everything that thinks that it connects to that old IP address will not work anymore. You'll have to reconfigure all the IP address and map everything back out. So it's best to set up a static IP address now. And to do that, no, I will set up a static IP addresses. So you can click that. And it should pop up, but it doesn't. So you can go down here to your network. Down here, you can right click it and open up Network and Sharing Center, or you can just go to Start, Control Panel. I always change this to large icons, and you can go down to Network and Sharing Center, and then up here you can go to Change Adapter Settings, right click it, go to Properties, and then click on your TCP IP version 4. We don't really need 6 at this moment, but version 4. And you go to Properties, and then obtain an IP address automatically. That's dynamic, and it's getting it from a DHCP server. We don't want that. So we're going to use our own. So we can go 10, oops, need my numlocks on there. So 10.1.1.50 for this server. The subnet mask is what's used to tell the network cards and all the networking devices what part of the IP address is the network portion and what's the host portion. So I'm not getting into subnetting right now, so you can get that out of your head. And 255.0. So what this quick breakdown is 255, 255, 255, that's the max. So that indicates that these first 3 octets here are part of the network ID. So these won't change. And then 50, see how it says 0? You can have 255 addresses here. So our default gateway, so if we're trying to communicate with something that's not within our network, so let's say, for example, 10.1.1 can go from .1 all the way to .254, okay? So if we have something higher than that on a different network, it's going to go travel to our default gateway to get there. And then your preferred DNS server, because we're using our own, you put in what is known as a loopback address. So 127.0.0.1, let's say. Any address that begins with 127 is known as a loopback address. And what that will do is when your server wants to contact a DNS server, it'll look here and it'll loop back to itself. Now you can set this up as 10.1.1.50, but if you ever change your IP address, if you ever change this IP address, this will still be 10.50 and you'll get some errors. So it's better to use a loopback so it'll always stay that address. So 127.0.0.1. And then just hit OK. And then hit close here. And you'll see it'll work. You'll see down here my network will disconnect because I don't really have a router hooked up in this virtual PC or anything, so I'm going to lose my internet. Okay, so that's done now. And you can see down here I've lost my no internet access. So anyways, but now that that's done, we can hit next. And it's just going to give you like a little, not an error, but it's just saying that, you know, there's no delegation made for this server because there is none. We haven't set anything up yet. So you just hit yes here, and now you're going to be getting into the location of the files and log files and sysvolume folders. They say it's recommended to separate the NTDS from the sysvolume, put them on different like drives, but in our case it's fine for all on the C drive. It's okay. So you can leave that default, or if you really want to, you can browse and choose a different location that you have set up already. And just hit next here. And this password we're going to set up is for restore mode. So if anything major ever happens to our server here and we can't get into it, we can't log in, you can run restore mode, and you'll need this password to get in there. So keep it in a safe place, remember it. You're not going to use it often, so I would really suggest writing it down into your little folder there. Don't leave it on the server or anything, because clearly if your server won't start, you won't be able to get in there and look for the password. So just write it down somewhere and keep it handy. You never know when this password will be needed. So you can hit next here, and this is just a summary. So it's going to break down what we're doing. You know, St.Onge is our net BIOS name. Our new domain is st.onge.com. Force functional 2003. Domain functional 2000. What else? You know, additional options. Read only, no. Global catalog, yes. You know, you can just keep going on and on. And then new to Windows Server 2008, you have this export settings. So you can use this to create an answer file. And what an answer file is if you had to set up, if you're in an organization, you had to set up like 25 of these domain controllers, let's say. Well, you can set up one, take the answer file, and then you know where you write in DC promo? You can type in DC promo /unattend, and then the file you name this answer file. So you can export the settings here, save it to unattended, hit next. Okay, you know, the settings were successfully exported to, and here's the path to it. Okay, hit OK, and then just hit next. And now this is going to, it could take a while, so I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to have this check mark, so reboot on completion. So when it's all done, it's going to reboot itself, and the next time I speak to you, we're going to have a domain controller. So yeah, I'll be right back. Okay, so we're all logged in now, and I set it up. I hit record just before everything starts to pop up here. So this is what you're going to see when you first log into a server. You're going to get this initial configuration tasks here. Just kind of gives you things to help you out here. So, you know, obviously step 1, activate, set up your time, you know, configure your networking, provide name, blah blah blah. Okay, you know, updates and all that. So you can exit this, and then server manager window is going to pop up, and this here is going to show us everything that we have now. Okay, so we have 2 roles, Active Directory and DNS. And it's going to tell us our role status. So we got some messages, we got some, you know, some errors here, some warnings, not errors, sorry, warnings. That's normal in a server. Okay, so we can click on Active Directory domain services. Okay, so there's nothing really, just a couple of warnings. You can double click on them. See, and I believe these are because when you remove a domain controller, it's best to reinstall the operating system, which I didn't. So it's just like conflicting here, but we can ignore them. Like there's not going to change the way we do anything throughout our videos. It's just having a conflict with the old name, st.onge.com. I just didn't want to have to reinstall everything, but I'm just showing you these errors, so in case you do see them. That's just an indication that someone had Active Directory installed, removed everything, and just reinstalled it. It's best to reformat the whole computer. If you're going to remove a domain controller, that's what they say is the best practice. Just remove everything. So we can close out of here, and to verify that we have a good everything installed properly, we want to go to Start, Administrative Tools, and when this pops up, we're going to have about 5 new, or 6 plus 7 new tools here in our administrative tools. We got our group policy management, we got our DNS, and then this here you're going to get very familiar with: Active Directory, users and computers. Then you got sites and services, domains and trusts, administrative center. So we're going to look at users and computers here. This is the main tool that you're going to use setting up your domain here. You know, whether it's making user accounts or computer accounts, or, you know, making queries. Show you how to do all that. So I'm just going to show you what's default first. So you can open up here, you can expand. You got your built-in users and groups, and then you got your normal users and groups. Now the big difference between these are built-in is strictly for domain controllers, okay? Like the administrator here and the administrator for users are different. Built-in, this is the administrative group for the whole domain, like any domain controllers within your domain. And users is just the user, the administrator for this domain controller. Domain admins, again, you can be put into this group and you'd be an administrator throughout your domain, blah blah blah. You got your computer container, and then you got your domain controllers. So you want to make sure that your computer name is listed there. Okay, so default first site name, and it's a global catalog computer, whatever. And we're not going to get into foreign securities and all that stuff, but I just wanted to show you the default OUs, containers, what you want to call them. This is all default, and you can also verify by checking out the sys volume folder. So it's located on your C drive, Windows, and you can go down here, sys volume, it's all there. And I believe the logs, they're all there. Okay, so everything got installed, the NTDS. This is your big folder here, ntds.dit, our big file. Can't really customize it from here. So everything got installed and everything is working. So I hope this was informative to you guys. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but I'm learning, and by doing this, it helps me learn also. So I hope you guys follow along and watch all the other videos. The next video, we're going to start to construct our domain. We're going to set up like organizational units and seeing how all that stuff plays in with this, and, you know, some good understandings of the architect of an Active Directory domain. So thanks for watching, guys, and I guess I'll see you later.